Welcome to the Cabinet. The date is 15th of October. There's a big agenda tonight. Can I ask that when you speak, introduce yourself for each item. If you've got nothing to say, please don't speak. I was going to say that. And this is a council chamber. It's not an echo chamber, so don't repeat anything that somebody else has said. So we'll start with apologies. We do have apologies, I believe.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor John Andrews.
Thank you. Item number 2 is the minutes of the last meeting of 10th of September 2024. The members of the Cabinet content? Yep. Okay, thank you. Number 3 is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Holloway.
Chairman, items 13 and 14, obviously regarding what's on my register of interests, obviously owning a business on Dorset Council land, I shall withdraw from those 2 items and not take part in those discussions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Item 4 is public participation. We have 1 question and 2 statements. We won't be reading the statements out. They will appear in the minutes. But we do have 1 question. And that is from... Where we go? Karen Tippins. Is she online? Ms. Tippins, do you want to speak now?
Yes, thank you very much. So this is in relation to agenda number 12, and the portfolio holder is Councillor Bartlett. So the clause 15.8 of the S106 agreement between Persimmons and the Local Planning Authority of 2007 specified that the proposed building classification usage for the land associated with Manpits, referred to as Manpits Green, east of Shaftesbury, is clear, and that the commuted sums is in excess of 240,000. These are planning obligations and constraints, and they were not addressed in either the 1st of October Planning Committee, nor do they appear to be addressed in the current Cabinet papers. D2 classification is the only allowed business classification that's specified in the contract, the S106 contract, for the community hall on this land. I understand that this changed to F2 classification for community halls, and there's also a restriction on the shops, etc. So you can't actually sell the same produce for anything that's within a 1,000-metre radius. So the decision notice on the for the 1st of October, that's dated the 2nd of October, for the Town Council planning application has actually allowed a B1A classification usage, which is commercial, which is against the actual specified contract. So that's gone against the planning obligation. This usage was clearly stated in the B1A classification was clearly stated on the Town Council planning application. In addition, there's been no account by Dorset Council made on the S106 commuter sum associated with Manpits Green, which I know is, as I was saying, is about £250,000. And this will help with the operational costs and upkeep of the land. There's also the VAT treatment plus the business rates versus for the Town Council as VAT registered, etc., aren't actually addressed in the running costs, whereas the charity, which is the other option, doesn't have VAT, it isn't VAT registered, my understanding, and also it wouldn't be applicable for business rates. So that hasn't been addressed. Please could Dorset Council explain as to why the contractual obligations for the S106 agreement have not been followed? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I think Councillor Bartlett is going to respond.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms Tippins, for your question. So, in answer to it, demonstrating planning consent has been a key component to the assessment of bids for Section 106 funding to deliver community facilities at Manpits Green, Shaftesbury. Through the planning process, the local planning authority has determined that the proposed cafe and offices within the Shaftesbury Town Council proposal are ancillary to the primary community use of the building, and as such, the proposal accords with the requirement of the Section 106 agreement. This judgment has been recognised in the assessment of the bids and features in Appendix B of the Cabinet report. Regarding the commuted sum, this will be calculated at the point when the land is ready to transfer from the developer to Dorset Council. Dorset Council will use the commuted sum to manage and maintain the land at Manpits Green. Once the funding conditions outlined in the Cabinet report have been satisfied, the land and the remaining commuted sum will transfer from Dorset Council to a third party to support the ongoing management and maintenance of the land. As such, the availability of the commuted sum does not form part of the funding award at this moment in time. In respect of the matter of VAT, the Council's 106 protocol does not distinguish treatment of VAT between public bodies and charities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. The next agenda item is questions from councillors, and I don't think we have any. No, okay. In which case we move on to the forward plan. Does any member of the Cabinet have anything they wish to highlight in the upcoming forward plan? Nope. In which case we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is reablement centres. And it's Councillor Robinson.
Good evening, councillors. Good evening, colleagues. I've been given quite a script to read through tonight, which in the interest of time, I'd like to thank Sam for preparing, but I shall set to one side ever so slightly. This is not quite the culmination, but it's the latest iteration of a plan that has been in place for some years in how we actually want to address how we work with our older population, or as I like to say, us. We have, within society, very often stereotyped older age as something other than us. Older people are always 15 years older than where we are, whatever age we are. It happens when we're 20, and it happens just as easily when we're 80. I had a meal, a really nice meal the other day. We did some, sorry, Nick. We did some dog sitting for some friends, and they gave us a voucher for a really posh restaurant, something we couldn't normally go to. And so we went to it, and we were sitting there. We had a really nice meal. We looked around. We suddenly realised that in this really nice, really posh restaurant, we were possibly the youngest people there. Nobody else was younger than us, except for one couple who were probably out on their first date. And from what my wife could hear, it wasn't going very well. But the point I'm making here is that we sometimes put older people into the silo of others, not needed by society anymore, where actually the grey pound, the grey economy is something we should be leaning into, we should be encouraging. The older people in that restaurant, apparently, according to some statistics I read today, they're real statistics, 7% of people over 60 bought a brand new car within the last 2 years. 11% of people over 60 bought a second-hand car. These older people are contributing to our economy, are part of our society now. And the reason I'm saying this at this stage is because the whole point of our reablement centres is we want to keep them a part of our economy. We want to keep them a part of our community. We don't want people just to go into hospital, come out, go into care, and then disappear from their communities. A reablement centre is not a care home. A reablement centre is not a hospital. It's a stepping stone on the way towards reintegration within the community, on the way to be reintegration into becoming part of the older economy. And so I am excited about this for all sorts of reasons. I'm excited because you'll see it's 60 beds. I'm excited because you'll see it's about 3.47 savings it's going to make. You see, Sam, I did read what you said. I'm excited because there's potentially £2 million worth of income from leasing there. I'm excited because in the first of its kind for the country, we could be linked to a university. It'll become like a teaching site for younger people to come and get proper qualifications. The university we talked to goes up to master's degree in occupational therapy, in social work, in community engagement. It's phenomenally exciting, never been done before in this way in the country. But ultimately, it's about people. It's about people being able to come out of hospital, free up the bed spaces so the NHS can get on with the stuff that it needs to get on with, but actually in a way that people do not feel isolated from their communities, in a way that people in Bridport can stay linked to their community, can stay to be looking after the grandchildren if they've got them, to stay to be volunteers in the community after just a short respite period. So you've seen the arguments and the paper is in front of you, and I know we've looked at it 3 or 4 times before, and I'm going to stop at this point for questions. But I just wanted to look at it from a different aspect. That this is about enabling our community. This is about enabling our residents to live their best life. I recommend it to you. Now, apparently, I don't have to go through all the recommendations, which are lengthy. There have been no amendments made, so the proposals are as written in the paper. I think, Jonathan, that's the right thing to say? That's the right thing to say. So I shall sit down at this point.
Can I seek a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Clifford. So the floor is now open to any non-cabinet members. Oh, Simon wants to speak. Sorry.
Just unlike Steve, I had no script at all, but I have been admonished by my finance colleagues because what I want to say was a bit too rude. So I want to highlight 1 or 2 phrases that are in the report that if you study them carefully, you realise that there was a wider plan that was going to start with a bigger project in Dorchester. And that hasn't happened because, what are the words I'm allowed to use? I'm allowed to say I'm surprised, I'm allowed to say it's frustrating, and I'm allowed to say it's disappointing. I'm not allowed to say what I was going to say. The NHS needs to pull its finger out when it's going to be the major beneficiary of some of these schemes and actually come on board and help us provide schemes that will help people across this county. It's not just a benefit for social care, it's an enormous benefit to the NHS system as well. So on that line, it's just, come on NHS, get on board, get back round the table, and let's make sure that Dorchester doesn't lose out where Bridport is gaining.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I did raise the subject with the chair of the ICB last Friday when I had a conversation with her, and she assured me she was going to look into it and chivvy them along. Anybody want to speak from our colleagues over on the right-hand side? Councillor Hobbs-Chell.
Councillor Hobbs-Chell, Fendown South Ward. I just wanted to reiterate my enthusiasm for this particular proposal and the sentiment going forward. Our older population are incredibly valuable as volunteers to society, as caregivers, as everything. And absolutely, this is 100% about being as inclusive as we can be for everybody in society. So, yeah, fully support everything. Thank you.
Councillor Azad.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I actually reiterate what Councillor Simon Clifford said, that it's disappointing that it's not going to happen in Dorchester, but let's face it, if we can get it anywhere, we need to get them soon. We need to do that. I had the pleasure of going around the Blandford Reablement Centre, which I was very impressed with, and I would urge anyone else to actually go and look at it. It is very, very impressive. And actually, they're doing a lot of good there. And it opened my eyes to what a reablement centre was. I think if we can get another one soon, that's great. But I think we've got to put pressure on the NHS. And having been, as I am, the governor for UHD, that's Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole hospitals, then I appointed from Dorset Council. I must say that I have been saying that there was going to be one that perhaps was in Dorchester, so I will have to take humble pie on that one. But it is rather, disappointing for not having it in the county town. But let's go with this. I mean, I think, that we need this, and we need to get lots of others in the whole of the county. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Azad. I think the plan is to have one in Dorchester. It's just that the discussions between Dorset Council and Dorset County Hospital have come to a bit of an impasse. I think they may get resolved soon, I believe. John Price, Executive Director for Children, wishes to speak. Adults, sorry.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, we are proposing that the Bridport site is the first. We are still in discussions with the NHS about Dorchester site, so I need to clarify that point. That hasn't ended. It's complicated. It's a complicated piece of land, so just to be absolutely clear that we are still progressing that, but this is very much our recommendation as the first site in Bridport.
Councillor Sompo, please.
Thank you. Oh. Yes, thank you. Councillor Jane Somper, Beacon Ward. Obviously, this actually isn't the first reablement site, but it is the first reablement site that Dorset Council will have built. As we know, the Blandford Centre was set up very quickly because the building was available and suitable, and it was a very good opportunity to learn from, and has been successful, and there have been many people that have gone through that system. I am not surprised by the fact that we have not been able to yet progress with Dorchester. I hope that changes moving forward, and I'm sure that officers will be having those most robust discussions continuing at pace. But clearly something needs to be done. Clearly there is pressure on the service in adults, and there is Sydney Gale Care Home site, which is available, which is an asset that we have that we can control and that we can move forward with. So it makes sense. It was in the mix anyway, and so I absolutely support this. Moving forward, to understand more about what that's actually going to look like in terms of the level of care, because I think there's a slight change. Perhaps in the level of care that's going to be required. Originally, that reablement centres had been put in the mix for. But overall, I absolutely support this. It absolutely has to be done to ensure that our adult services do not find themselves in a position where they can't function the way in which they have to function. Supporting our NHS is obviously important, and it would be helpful if they chose to be able to reciprocate that in their discussions around the Dorchester site.
Councillor Robinson, did you want to come back?
Councillor Somper, you're so good at that, very good. I'm just not as good with words. In defence of our NHS colleagues, I would say there is some executive will to progress with the Dorchester site. There's just some legal won't that are frustrating things at the moment. So we are hopeful that we will be able to see that happen shortly. But with regards to the other things, one thing that we do want to do is have control over what happens. So rather than have the developers design something and then present it to us, we want to be able to keep the design side to ourselves, so we actually have some control over the services that are provided and the style in which it's provided, so that we make sure that the best quality is delivered.
Do I have any other non-executive members to speak? Okay, in which case we'll move to the Cabinet. Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. Fully support the recommendation here and fully support the concept and the idea. My question is mainly around the paper here, and I'm just struggling to see the environmental impact assessment or anything in there. And I'm wondering, is there a reason that's been omitted? And just some reassurance that the building that we build will be environmentally friendly, sustainable, and sort of reducing energy costs and so on and so forward.
Yes, absolutely. The stage that the paper is in at the moment is not ready for that because we haven't actually got the site the way that we want it. This paper will come again in about autumn next year. at which point it will have the full analysis and proposals behind it.
Anybody else want to speak? In which case? Sam Paul. Okay, so.
Great, thank you. Sam Paul, Head of Social Care Transformation and Improvement. It was just to pick up that point around the environmental. Steve's absolutely right, but we will be aiming for BREEAM excellence in terms of the build quality and environmental aspects of this building going forward. So that's something that we are aiming for.
Thank you for clarifying that. In which case, we can move to a vote, or I don't think we need a vote. Are there any members of the Cabinet in disagreement with the recommendations that lays out in the paper? No? In which case, the recommendations are approved. We move on to agenda item 8, which is the Dorset Council childcare provision. I'll be presented by Councillor Claire Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess I'm not quite as excited about my paper as Councillor Robinson is about his, but nevertheless, I highly commend it. You've all read it, so you understand the context, the proposal, and the rationale, so I won't say too much. In relation to Blandford, I think the paper makes an extremely strong case for transfer to the Diocese of Salisbury Academy Trust, as set out in 3.1. There's a number of features in 3.1 which I'd highlight, but I'm just going to pick out one of them, which is that the nursery is on the same site as Archbishop Wake Primary School, which most of the children transfer to, so it will would provide a smoother transition from early years to school, and almost all the children at Oscars also attend the school. In terms of where we are to date, the consultation is about halfway through. We've had positive responses from families. The DSAT board has approved the transfer, subject to our decision this evening, and also subject to the outcome of the consultation. And the cherry on the cake, perhaps, last night Blandford Town Council passed a resolution to support the amalgamation with a unanimous vote, but bar one abstention. So that's Blandford. Moving on to Shaftesbury, also makes absolute sense. It's on the same gated site as Shaftesbury Primary School, which is part of the Sherborne Area Schools Trust. So there's an integrity, locational integrity there. Initial discussions with Sherborne Area School Trust have been positive. Financial feasibility assessment has gone to their board. Excuse me, we're just awaiting feedback. So subject to any questions, and I have some experts behind me to help with those if needed, I'd like to move the recommendation in full. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Robinson?
Yes, I'm very happy to second this. I've run a number of nurseries myself and know very much how complicated and challenging they are. And so I'm very, very supportive of this.
Thank you. Any non-executive members wish to speak? Nope. Any Cabinet members wish to speak on this? Councillor Hope?
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Ryan Hope, portfolio holder for customer culture and community engagement. Apologies, I didn't introduce myself on the last time. My question is, obviously we heard here that Blandford Town Council was in support of the merger or the transfer of the one in Blandford. Wondering if we had any feedback from Shaftesbury. Were they asked the question? Were they asked for their views and input?
I'll ask the officers behind me to reply in more detail, but my understanding is that because we're not so far forward with the Shaftesbury proposal, we're not at that stage yet.
Alice Deacon, Corporate Director for Commissioning and Partnerships, and I can say that Councillor Sutton's assessment of the situation is absolutely correct. We are in a good position with those conversations, but they are not as far advanced. However, we are absolutely certain that we will be able to deliver a good transition for this provision, as well as a good transition for Blandford.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Nope. Does any cabinet member disagree with the recommendations as laid out in the paper? We didn't read them all out, but they're quite detailed, and Councillor Sutton has covered them. No? Okay, in which case the recommendations are approved. Thank you. So we have agenda item 9, which I believe is Development Management and Local Enforcement Plan. So this is Councillor Bartlett. Just for your information, Councillor Bartlett's got 4 papers on the agenda tonight. He's going to present the first 2 of his, and then he's going to take a break. So we're basically going to go from item 10 through to 13, then 14, then 15, then back to 11 and 12, if that makes sense. So item 10 is Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Most kind of you, so I get a break. Thank you. So the Cabinet is before you tonight is the Development Management for the Local Enforcement Plan for 2024. So National Planning Policy Framework explains that effective enforcement is important in maintaining public confidence in the planning system, but also that enforcement action is discretionary and should act proportionally. LPA should act proportionally when responding to suspected breaches of planning control. Planning authorities should consider publishing a local enforcement plan and to manage enforcement proactively in a way that is appropriate to their area. This should set out how they will investigate alleged cases of unauthorised development and take action when it is considered to be appropriate. Dorset Council's current enforcement plan was adopted during the reorganisation of local government across Dorset in 2019, and at that time it was done at pace and the council needed to get over the line safe and legal. It was always the intention to go back and pick up our enforcement plan and to put something in place. And we now have officers that are able to deliver that enforcement plan, we believe. So since that time, there's been an introduction by central government of new guidance, law and legislation, which we must follow. And this proposed 2024 enforcement plan, Appendix 3, provides a detailed guidance of the processes involved in an enforcement investigation, a clear guidance on how to raise a complaint and the necessary information required, timescales to be expected for registering initial complaints and undertaking initial site visits, and guidance on how the council prioritises the complaints it receives. So, Chairman, the recommendation that you have before you is that the Cabinet consider the proposed response to BCP Council, sorry, beg your pardon. Yep. The Cabinet consider the No, it's okay. It's just I've lost my place in the page. Got it. Sorry, beg your pardon. So the recommendation is that the Development Management Local Enforcement Plan 2024, the LEP document, be formally adopted, thereby superseding the current published Development Management Planning Enforcement Plan for 2019. And I believe Councillor Councillor Holloway will second my recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Ryan Holloway, portfolio holder for corporate development and transformation. Very happy to second this one, Chairman. I think, as my cabinet colleague has said, you know, the current, obviously, the one from 2019 was obviously got us safe and legal, but obviously now we now have the opportunity now, obviously now to develop this now even further, and this, yeah, I certainly welcome this, and I thank my cabinet colleague for his work and thank the officers for this. So very happy to second this and support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Leader. I have an interest in planning enforcement, funny enough, having done it for a little while. This is a good paper coming before us, but there is a degree of confidence from the public that this works for us. What I would ask, can we build in an update to members of the public complainants, that they get a regular update at least once a month? I'm not anticipating that, but people do want to know where their case is going, and we shouldn't leave it months without updating them at all. Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett, do you want to answer that? Do the officers? I suspect with the move to more technology and AI and all that sort of stuff, we can probably automate that going forward. I'll let the officers decide what they're going to do.
Chairman, I've been assured by the officers we will be providing regular updates.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bart. I think the Pacific Acts was 1 month, but we can work on it. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Suttle.
Thank you, Chair. The original report, which this was page 71, 72, gives 8 findings, all of which are fairly damning. Number 4 is to effectively do what we're doing now, which I applaud and support. But can I have the portfolio holder's assurance that the findings 1 to 8, obviously excluding 4, are also being addressed? Because each one has its own measure of concern, and the actual overall opinion was that although it's generally sound of governance, risk management and control, sound system of governance, risk management and control in place, some issues, non-compliance or scope for improvement were identified, which may put at risk the achievement of objectives in the area. So I think that while this plan, I applaud this and support it, do have concerns about the other items that come up, and I know that members of the public regularly contact us about what they consider to be lack of enforcement. So I seek your assurance that you are addressing these items. Thank you.
Chairman, I can assure my colleague that yes, they are being taken into account. The officers have assured me of that as well. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak? Cabinet members? Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got one question, and it's a similar question I ask whenever we see policies around enforcement, and that is, do we have the adequate resources to deliver on this policy? Because having the policy there without the teeth to use it, so to say, makes it very pointless, and I'd rather have a policy that we have the resources to manage. So that's my question and almost challenge at this point is, can we deliver on it? Can we work to it?
I'll hand over to the officers in a minute, but it's a discretionary service, Chairman, and it is tends to be a light touch. The opportunity when we have those investigations around enforcement is to try and negotiate and achieve a suitable outcome. My understanding is that we do have the officer capacity to achieve that. I'll ask the officers if they want to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Lee, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement. Just to confirm that we do monitor cases opened and cases resolved on a regular basis, and they generally show that the team do resolve cases in line with the cases open, so maintain that throughput of resolving cases. And we are aware there is an issue around legacy cases, and that was identified through the audit, and we have an action which is ongoing to resolve that separately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Councillor Hope, you want to say again?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. So I just want to pick up, you're saying you have the resources for a light touch. If we have to go further into this policy and deliver some of the more of the robust and more time-consuming, do we still have those resources? Because if we don't and we can't deliver on this policy, we're setting ourselves up to fail.
We do have those resources. Often what the team are delivering with a large workload and heavy workload already. A lot of it is legacy cases. Quite often a lot of what the team deal with is actually what amounts to civil matters between neighbour disputes and that type of thing. In terms of those legacy cases, some of those will be outside now of the option of actually doing anything around. I believe it was a 10-year cut-off period. So with being a new council, we took on a lot of legacy cases that come from the predecessor authorities, but we do have the officer capability to do the investigations, to do the work. Obviously, with the state of local government finances, if I can say. Probably the option we don't really want to do is continually be in the courts. So that's why we try to negotiate and bring about a suitable outcome.
Sorry, Councillor Bartlett, can I have a very standard yes or no question answer on this one? Do we have the resources to deliver this policy in full? Should we have to go down to the right to the end of the enforcement process?
No. I'll refer to Mr. Garrity.
Yeah, Mike Garrity, Head of Planning here. I just want to offer some reassurance on that point. I mean, the purpose of the enforcement plan is to identify a system of prioritising the cases where we know those critical cases are dealt with. So whilst we have expediency issues around whether it's expedient to enforce, government policy is that we should seek to negotiate solutions where they can be found to be acceptable. So we only take the enforcement cases where it's really critical and we need to actually intervene. The policy is helping us to do that, and the officer resource is there to be able to do that in accordance with the priorities set out in there. So where we've referred to legacy cases is that is something that we're working to clear the backlog so that officers can maintain the delivery of the service in accordance with the resources we've got, which is adequate based on the casework we've got. So in answer to your question, yes. But if you do need a bit more detail about how we intend to work that, I'm more than happy to talk with you outside of the meeting.
Happy with that, Councillor Hope? Yeah, okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I'm supportive, but I'm slightly softening a little bit just because of the language that's being used. So Councillor Taylor and I will know that we have a particular case in mind, I won't go into the detail, where an individual is playing the system, playing the planning system that we have to his advantage or her advantage or their advantage. Let me use a safe pronoun. I get that that's within this, but it does come down to what Councillor Hope was saying, that resources are absolutely key here. You're talking about getting rid of the backlog. I'm hoping this is one of the backlogs where local people have been complaining and not getting satisfaction. And it's just a level of confidence that I think we're all seeking, that you've got everything you need. This plan will give you the weaponry that you need to stop people playing the system in the way they are at the minute.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. It basically comes down to the fact, as legislation stands at the moment, the plan that we're putting in place does accommodate that. What really needs to happen is there needs to be tight legislation coming down from government over enforcement. At the moment, we're limited as an authority in what we can do.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Anybody else wish to speak? No, in which case, does anybody disagree with the recommendations that are laid out, despite various comments? No, in which case the recommendations are approved. Thank you. And we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the second of Councillor Bartlett's, which is Sturminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to say a great deal about this. We've had various neighbourhood plans come before us. What I would say in the Inspectorate, when looked at this neighbourhood plan, really did commend Sturminster Marshall for the work that they've done. It is an excellent document if you've read it. So I'm just happy to move straight to the recommendation that the Council makes the Sturminster Marshall Neighbourhood Plan 2023 to 2033, as set out in Appendix A, part of the statutory development plan for the Sturminster Marshall neighbourhood area, and B, that the Council offers its congratulations to Sturminster Marshall Parish Council and members of the Neighbourhood Plan Group for producing a successful neighbourhood plan. And I believe Councillor Holloway is going to second this one as well. Chairman, thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're very happy to second this item as well. So, yeah, I absolutely commend Sturminster Marshall for coming up with this very brilliant neighbourhood plan. So we're very happy to second and support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. Any wish to speak? Non-cabinet members? No. Any cabinet members wish to speak? I suspect not. Anybody disagree with the recommendation? In which case the recommendation is approved. Thank you. So as I mentioned previously, we're going to skip to item 13, agenda item 13, to give Councillor Bartlett a break. And then so item 13 is growth and economic regeneration strategy, and is Councillor Richard Briggs to present.
Thank you, Leader. You will see the paper before you. It is, in fact, more than just an economic growth strategy. There's some 4 key points there, and one very important, quite historic question that we're asked to actually make a decision on approve the withdrawal from Dorset LEP. So it is more than that. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, this is not the strategy is to be developed. What this is doing is setting out how that will go about. And I think it's key to assure members that there will be, in setting up this work, there will be member involvement. And it's not just going to be a case of there's going to be a draft plan that will go to overview, make a few comments, and then it will just go through. It's not going to be like that. There's a lot of work to do in developing that. So I would point to paragraph 1.35 if you've missed that, which lays out the process for member working groups and cross-party working, and appreciate there was much work that Simon Gibson did prior to me taking over this role. But we need to do to develop this further, and I think really turbocharge it going forward. Prior to this meeting, literally just about 5 o'clock, we had myself and the leader had an email from the executive director of the LEP. It's a very long email, so I haven't had a chance to really take it all in. But there's a few quite good points, I think, which made, and that is to be about to be bold, not just step into that space of LEP, but to do more, I think. And that's a fair comment. I think there's a danger just to be, or we've got to do something, so we just recreate a sort of Dorset-wide version. So I think that's a good comment. There's some things about Devo, which we can take on board, but I think that there's a lot of good work that has been done with the LEP's growth framework, and I think we can take some of that, so we don't need to completely reinvent the wheel. But by creating a new growth board, we have a chance to refocus it perhaps more within Dorset Council's geographical area, and there is a certain leaning to the east, to Bournemouth and Poole, understandably, and it's perhaps a shame that BCP are not part of this potential Devo deal, which is slightly out of this, but who knows? We do need to work with each other, obviously, because we are one county, but we have opportunities to perhaps focus more on our principal market towns and Weymouth and Portland. A better focus on how we can do that. We know many of the problems and issues which impact us, and that's whether the availability of economic growth land, skills shortages, how to retain people, and the housing impacts and transport impacts all feed into making it a challenge. But that's something that we shouldn't shy away with. There's an awful lot of interest in Dorset. We all know it's a lovely place to live and work, but you do need, as part of the manifesto and the corporate land, say, we need those things to support people to stay here and work, and economic growth is the best way of improving prosperity, which will lift people out of poverty, which is something we should applaud. So I think there's some really good things in here, but there's some key important other recommendations, particularly on the setting up the new growth board and who we get on that. Obviously, the governance of that will be key as we go forward, getting that right. We can do a good job or we can do a bad job, and we can get the wrong people on there. We can do, So at this stage, it's all to play for. But I think there's some real interest from the business, current people that we know. There may be other people out there. You will see in there, obviously, links, mentions of potential opportunities within Dorset around the LEP and other opportunities. We know we're constantly being asked by businesses of potential other opportunities that could be coming our way, particularly around Weymouth and Portland, and obviously with the waterfront development projects, which we're meeting potential developers tomorrow in Weymouth. So there's an awful lot happening which will feed into this. But there's a lot of work to do yet. This is just the start, really. But it's not to say we're starting from a blank page. We've got a lot of the key data there, and I'm sure other members will pick some other issues up. But really happy to support the recommendations here and look for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clifford, thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just a quick one, because I, having spent quite a lot of time working with the LEP and within the LEP, it's interesting to see their approach, and I think they all have the right idea on how to deliver, and I think this strategy captures quite a lot of that. And I would say that there's a huge opportunity in Dorset to make significant gains in terms of the local economy, but actually the national economy. These are nationally important schemes that we have the potential to secure here in Dorset, and will be some of the senior officers will know that I've been agitating for us to get more involved and be more forthcoming and proactive on a national level, on a regional level, and on a local level. And I think this strategic plan, great though it is just a plan. It's a strategy, and it won't win us anything. We need to have, as Councillor Hope would say, we need the resources behind it in order to it to deliver. And I hope that everyone in this room and everyone in this council will be willing to commit to delivering just that. It's an enormously ambitious and exciting opportunity in Dorset, and if we can land any of these big nationally important schemes, it will be to the benefit of everyone here. So I applaud it. I just hope it's the first step on our road to deliver what we need.
I'm looking to Councillor Gibson, but you wish to speak? Yeah, go on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simon Gibson, representing the Verwood ward. The main thing I want to say is I welcome the paper. I'm pleased to see that we're bringing forward an economic growth strategy. It was always a plan to bring one forward this autumn, and it's great to see that work continue. Probably to talk first to the most substantive part, which is a recommendation about the withdrawal from the LEP. I fully support that. Personal view is I think if we can do that sooner than the deadline that sets, I noticed that's a backstop. I would encourage you to do so. I think there's a lot to be gained as we set about creating our own economic growth strategy for making sure that we've secured full control over how we do that in our council area. And I think that can only be best served outside of the LEP. That's no comment on the good work the LEP's done over the years, but I'm pleased to see this come back into Dorset Council's control. In particular, I think where it's important for us is as we go to try and make sure that any economic growth strategy is felt, the benefit of which is felt across the county, we can do that better when we do our own strategy. In the report, I think it's 1.2 onwards, it identifies the main opportunities so far that we have identified to really drive economic growth in Dorset. These are good projects. I support them all. In particular, I want to continue my support for the ongoing work of the regeneration of Weymouth. I think it's really, really important that we do so. And in particular, I'm grateful that there's a mention of scale and the importance of scale as we go to try and bring in significant inward investment into Dorset. There's no point in just recirculating the same stuff. We need to attract genuinely big investment, especially in some of our key strategic priorities, like, for example, floating offshore wind. I think there's probably good consensus on that. But one thing the report is definitely missing, and as this gets fleshed out, we really, really need to see more information on. There is not enough projects in the north. There's not enough projects in the east. Almost all of these projects currently are identified in the Dorchester to Weymouth corridor. They're good projects, but they can't be the only projects on the list. So as this goes forward, I'd like to see a lot more about what can be done, especially in our rural areas in the north, please. Apart from that, it's a good paper and it continues to have my support. A slight procedural gripe that I have brought up with officers before is just the timing of it. This is coming to Cabinet tonight. We don't have our briefing as a council until tomorrow, and it's on the overview forward plan for January, but the report says it wants the work done by January. So we need to get our ducks in a fairer row if we're actually going to do this properly. The report's quite skeletal at the minute, as it should be, because it's the start of a long piece of work. But if we're going to do this justice, it has to be in the right order. So that's my only other plea.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's some really good points, and I was nodding all the way through. The point about the LEP is that is a backstop position because it does involve members of staff and a potential redundancy situation. There has to be full consultation, and actually that process is starting this week, so it is happening as fast as that. So on that bit, you're right. I would just slightly allude to your penultimate point there about other parts of the county. Yes, you're right, and I would support more projects coming forward. I would say, having worked in Somerset previously with Hinkley Point and also Gravity, the travel to work area is enormous, and it was 90 miles. So any of the major projects we're talking about here would have an impact on the whole of the county, but I think it's a point well made.
I believe Councillor Northam wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of follow on a little bit from what's been said. I thought we were getting an economic strategy paper at this point in time, but that's my ignorance partly. What I'd like to see is in the forward plan, it set out some of the key stages that are going to be taking place in moving this plan forward, because it's fairly obvious from what's written, it's going to take some while, but I don't want it to take, and I'm sure nobody wants it to take more than a year, but what are the stepping points? What are the points that we're going to get through? So I'd like to see a forward plan set out the steps that get us to a point where we have a strategy which actually tells us what the opportunities are and how we're going to pursue them, what the barriers to growth are that we're going to overcome. And I'd highlight one barrier which is mentioned in the report. It's the lack of education and skills training in the area, particularly higher education. We're very reliant upon Bournemouth University as the only university. It doesn't do the range of things which might be necessary to actually capture some of the investment money that the government is touting at the moment in its Invest 2035 plan. It's got some really ambitious numbers in there, and I know they're linked to devolution and whether we can access them as a question, but I think we need to be looking at where this big money might come from and what parts of our of our unitary area can deliver this, because we're not homogenous across our unitary area. We've got different characteristics in different parts, and we need to be able to tune what we're doing to the benefit of each area. The last bit, I am critical, having listened to the LEP when they came and talked to Weymouth Town Council, and we asked them the question, what has the LEP done for Weymouth? After a long pause, there was an answer, which was, we've made some money over for an engineering technician course at Weymouth College, and we've made over some money for I can't quite remember the name of the course, at Kingston Moorwood. There wasn't exact accuracy in the response, and we've never heard very much since. So the demise of the LEP was very good at picking the low-hanging fruit, which was focused around Bournemouth University and Bournemouth Airport. I'm hoping that we can move forward with a more Dorset unitary area focus, and I really would recommend picking up with the Chamber of Commerce, which is mentioned in here, because they have staff who have been involved in this, and combining that resource with our own limited resource within the council, I think we can fill a place and be more focused, as has been said, on what we need in Dorset. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northam. Your points on education are well made. I was at the Great South West previous week, and as Councillor Gibson has alluded to, offshore wind, Celtic Sea is a huge project which could bring great benefits to not just Dorset, but the whole of the South West. We're talking about 5,000 jobs in 10 years. But the concern is where we get the staff from and skills for that. Councillor Fry, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Les Fry, Dorchester West. I welcome this report, and anything we can do to improve our county has to be beneficial for us all. I just wonder whether there's something missing in there. There's no markers, no indicators in this, whether this is money we're bringing into Dorset, whether we're going to bring jobs into Dorset, whether we're going to bring education into Dorset. Effectively, you set up a board, have a plan. Where's the indicators that it's a success or not?
One of the things of a strategy as opposed to a framework is to set goals, and those goals are not set at this point in time. I think that's it's a fair comment. We need to recognise that this point, this is non-financial. We don't know. That's not to hand, but I'm sure officers, I don't know if Mr. Webster would be able to give a better answer than myself on that, because it's information I don't have to hand really, but it's something that we do need in the goals.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to pick up that point, and I'll come back to the point about timescales as well. So Nick Webster, Head of Growth and Regeneration. On the point about timescales that was mentioned, I think we said in the report we're looking at early next year for the report, for the strategy to be complete. We've got to go through a period of consultation with the business community. During that period, we've obviously got to draft the strategy as well, get it through scrutiny and overview committee. So we're looking at that as a kind of timescale. I think it's a valid question about setting out a programme for you and then sharing that with you. We've already developed something internally as officers, so I'm very happy to share that with members at any point, and we can circulate that around. Coming back to the point about some outcomes and some definitives in there, I think this is going to be a couple of documents within this strategy. You have a strategy yourself and an action plan underneath that will set out what projects we're going to be looking at promoting, supporting, and what actions will need to be taken to help address the issues that we identify within the strategy. And that will contain a series of potential projects, their outcomes, their potential key indicators, and we can set that out as a live document that can be reviewed on an ongoing basis, but by members and officers, so that we've got a consistent understanding of where we're contributing towards the overall economic growth of the county. So the strategy itself will be maybe a 4 or 5 year plan. Underneath that would be some form of action plan, which will then be a live document that you'd kind of review on a consistent basis, and within that there'd be outcomes and targets that we'd look to achieve. Does that answer your question, Councillor Fry?
Thank you. I would have liked to see some aspirations in the paper somewhere. You're starting on a journey, but we don't know where the journey is going to go or what the end result is. And I think that would have been helpful, even if they were unclear and as yet defined, but some ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hobbs-Chell and then Councillor Sompo.
Thank you. I do welcome this paper, having read through it, and I think it does bring some advantages over what we've had previously. I just would like sort of A, confirmation, and B, to make a suggestion, really, I suppose, is that we will make closer links with our chambers, particularly Dorset Chamber, and with the local bids and the local chambers, and really get them in the room with us as members, because I think it's really vital that their message is heard. They're on the ground, they're running their businesses, they're part of their businesses. And I think that's been a frustration, probably, to be fair, previously, where there hasn't been that opportunity as much. And I hope that this looks like a better opportunity for that. But alongside that, I think we're missing an opportunity potentially to get universities, colleges, further education centres in the room with us too, all together, so that we're all knowing where everybody is. And I don't really see that in the report. It would be nice to see that.
So Councillor Biggs is going to respond to that.
With the growth board that's going to be set up, the members of that board, I envisage being people like the Chamber, potentially bids, university, anyone who's got a skin in the game, really, because it's not necessarily councillors who are best to make those decisions, I think. Mr. Webster.
I think the other thing to emphasise is that within that consultation process, which we're conducting with the Dorset Chamber, They will be engaging with local chambers, so we're envisaging holding a number of workshop events with the business community in kind of a geographical spread across the county. So that will be done not only with the Dorset Chamber, but with the local chamber or the local bid. So we'll try and get their engagement of both them as entities and organisations, but also their individual members as well. Now, that's going to be an ongoing kind of conversation. It's the start of this engagement with the business community. And as Councillor Biggs has mentioned, if the pinnacle of our business engagement is an economic growth board, underneath that should be a series of engagement mechanisms with the business community, whether that's through officers of the economic development team, whether it's through networks, whether it's through self-service of our website. We should be offering a number of engagement points for the business community to have that kind of direct conversation with us. And that will be set out as part of the strategy in terms of how we can then take that as an ongoing process going forwards.
Thank you. Councillor Somper?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Can we look at the education side of things as well? Because I think that skills coming forward, we know there's a skill shortage, and actually getting them in the room at the same time would be really valuable.
Councillor Somper, now it's your turn. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Somper, Beacon Ward. I recognise clearly this is sort of an outline, really, more, and you've identified various opportunities. It's quite an interesting read. And you state in here that Dorset is already a county of innovation. It is also a county of agriculture, farming, and food production. And that doesn't seem to be have been particularly acknowledged here. So just moving forward, when you look at all the different sectors, that you will be, of course, including that very important part of what is a rural county, whilst recognising all these other really interesting opportunities that are in here.
Thank you, Councillor Somper. Anybody else wish to speak? Cabinet or otherwise? Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, can I seek a bit of clarity? So my understanding of the recommendations is that we are putting the LEP aside, but focusing more on the strategy that we're referring to here. We're effectively forming a board to develop a strategy further in line with some of the recommendations within this paper this evening. It's my understanding that this paper isn't currently that strategy. Is that correct?
The strategy is not developed as such. This is the outline. I suppose it's the framework to how we're going to deliver that strategy, and the board will continue beyond the strategy, delivering the strategy. So I see it. I don't know if that's correct, Mr. Webster. He's nodding.
Yeah, that's perfect because it lines me up for the questions that I had then. So much as Councillor Somper's just said that we're missing an opportunity here around economic growth within the farming industry, the growth, I think that needs to be included within the context about the identifying the opportunity, because that is an opportunity for economic growth in our county. The other thing I'm really looking at in some of these areas, don't seem to be a strategy sort of. They almost seem some of them to be on the delivery point. Some of these projects here are huge and have a huge potential for us in Dorset, but if they don't pull off, and effectively they're not in our hands to pull off, we can support them, then we've got very limited opportunity from what we've put in here of our identifying opportunities. So I'd rather us focus on a strategy, and some of these projects I think mainly should sit in a delivery strategy about things that we're going to support. I also want to echo the comments made previous on around the vision on delivery of some of these projects. It does seem to be quite south, west, sort of very limited west approach. And I'm looking at, and I've got to say, the Innovation Park out at Wimfrift. For that to succeed, it needs the success of our smaller industrial units that are around Dorset, and I'm talking now as an engineer in Weymouth on the industrial site. You've got a great industrial site in Weymouth, you've got an industrial site on Portland, you've got a great industrial site in Ferndown. The success of those businesses on that site rely on these other industrial units around Dorset, and I think the strategy needs to focus on them also. So I'd really like to see within the inclusion of the limits here, maybe under, because you've got what to 1.29, support and focus on other industrial sites around Dorset. The other one I was looking at as well is around how we can use our community and voluntary sector to support this. So we talk around regeneration of our high streets. Now, we all know that the high streets are declining, which is why I'm surprised not to see retail as a strategy point in here. But for the retail units that are still existing in our town centres, they need that change to a leisure area, leisure destination. And I think our community and voluntary sector have got a big part to play in that, in developing our town centres into areas of leisure, culture, so that when you visit them, you support those businesses in the area. So there's just 2 points there that I'd like to see added into the consideration pot for the board once it's set up, and that's support for other industrial areas within the county and working with our voluntary and community sector to create leisure and cultural hubs to support economic growth.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Do you want to make any comments, Councillor Biggs?
I think there's some really good points you've made there, and we will consider them. I think that, you know, it's certainly retail is an important part of that, but I know there's a market town strategy, which would be something else, and other things that will feed directly into that. Thank you.
Mr. Britton.
Thank you, Leader. Jan Britton, Executive Lead for Place. I think you've illustrated why this is the beginning of a process, not the end. But perhaps I'd also add that in developing this sort of strategy, you're completely right. We don't have all of the control here. We're very much an agent of influence, working with partners, business community, education community, and so on. And we have to decide which levers we can successfully pull. And at the end of the day, a strategy to do everything isn't a strategy. A strategy to do everything is a nice document, but it won't help us move forward. So as we develop this, there are going to be some, I think, probably quite hard choices about which areas of work the council wants to be involved in, acknowledging that most of those areas of work are not our gift to control. They're not within our, our remit. We have some influence. We have the planning system. We have the input we can make working with the Chamber of Commerce and local businesses. But we are going to have to, in developing this strategy, make some, I think, as I say, some quite hard choices about where we put the capacity that's available to us, because we're not going to have the capacity to do everything we would like in every sector of Dorset's economy. And that's why this is the beginning of a strategy writing process, not the conclusion of it, if I may.
I'll take Councillor Suttle and then Councillor Clifford.
Oh, I'd probably like to listen to what he said first, but I always support this type of initiative. It's always very helpful, and the aspirations are, of course, wonderful. However, I then become slightly depressed when I hear who we're going to talk to, and it usually boils down to the same people, a narrow band of people who talk about chambers of trade, etc. I believe Dorset Chamber of Trade has about 650 members. That's hardly representative of Dorset, tens of thousands. It's interesting that the one organisation that has a list of every business premises in Dorset, namely Dorset Council, perhaps is not taking advantage of that list. And maybe we should think more out of the box about how we contact businesses, how we find out what they really want. Because I don't think we'll find out from just consulting with a narrow group of people who we consistently consult with, and probably that's why we are where we are. So all I'm asking us to do is think a little bit out of the box, try and consult far more with business in general, because most businesses believe the council works at such a slow pace they just can't be bothered. And we need to show them that there's far more to the council when it comes to commercial thinking than they believe. And I think that we can do better.
Thank you, Councillor Suttle. Councillor Clifford.
I find myself agreeing with Councillor Suttle once more. This is a bromance in the making. I'm being urged to move, so I get slightly more on camera. I don't quite know what's going on, but let me come over here. I'm quite happy not to be on camera, don't worry. Just a couple of quick points. I'm in contact with a number of businessmen who think a council should be nowhere near anything like this. I'm also in contact with a very significant organisation who feel they should be much more involved, and that's the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, who really want to be part of something like this. The other comment I was going to make was to reassure Councillor Hope. Nationally important schemes can be won by councils. So Gravity in Somerset was won after a local authority pitch, and that's where it came from. It was a very successful pitch, and it's going to generate an enormously nationally important scheme for Somerset that will do an awful lot for their economy. So it's counterpoints there. Some people just don't think councils are any good at doing this at all. Other people think that they must be at the heart and soul of driving everything else, otherwise no one else is. So it's a tightrope that we've got to write through this strategy. And I think we're, as we said a number of times now, on the first step on that path.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I'm going to give Councillor Gibson the last word. Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. On the point about nationally important infrastructure and the scale of it, it can't be underestimated that. And councils can win it, definitely can win it, but we're actually best placed to do it with other councils. Groupings are really important for this. Chairman, I think you now represent the council in the Great South West. If I was to suggest one place to start to try and pick up where a lot of these big strategic infrastructure projects will come from, it'll come from groupings like the Great South West. In fact, a lot of the identified projects in the paper are ones that the Great South West themselves have identified. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. And when it comes to trying to make sure that we've got the priorities right within it, the paper's not far wrong. The play about spreading it geographically comes from, we know that there are sectors that Dorset's been identified as important for us. Agriculture, like Councillor Somber said, is one that we have been listed within the Great South West as being good at. But there's no site identified for what that would be in Dorset yet. So the play is don't reinvent the wheel, go with what we're good at already, but just spread it around the county.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. And I echo your comments on the Great South West. And the Great South West recently published an independent economic review, which is, it's about 30 pages long, but it's well worth reading, because if you just skim the forward bit, it tells you what's going on in the South West and where we're strong. Exactly, and defence is one of them. Anyway, I think we'll close that there. Councillor Hope wants to speak again. Go on.
Thank you very much, Chair. There was another point that I wanted to raise under the considerations as well. I can't see anywhere where we're looking at digital innovation support for businesses. So some of the most successful businesses are one guy in a room with digital business now. I couldn't see anywhere in there where it's a consideration for the strategy group to consider. So again, I'd like consideration into that from this board that are going to be looking at strategic growth and opportunities.
There is a mention, it's in front of me now, about embedding digital technology across all sectors. So it sort of covers it, but yeah, I'll take your point. I will close it now. Does anybody in the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations? There's 4 of them. They're quite important, especially in dissolving the LEP, for example. But you're okay with that, in which case recommendations are approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to agenda item 14, which is Councillor Biggs again, which is the Strategic Asset Management Plan 24 to 33.
Okay, thank you very much. I should have introduced myself at the beginning. Property Assets and Economic Growth is my portfolio, and a councillor for Dorchester Poundbury. So we have the Strategic Asset Management Plan, which is the SAMP. An earlier version, very similar to this draft, went to overview, and that was picked up with some good comments, which we filtered into that. I think this is, you'll see it mentioned several times. This is about us moving away from being traditional property managers, just managing that asset, but being placemakers. And that's something that's, is sort of council speak, isn't it? But if we're trying to deliver a corporate plan and changing things, we've got to be smarter with our assets. If we can use it for specific things better to deliver our outcomes, we should do it. If we don't need it, we should dispose of it. We shouldn't be renting properties that we could be, or using properties on an industrial estate that we could rent out and make money off for economic development, etc. So it's taking a far more holistic view across our asset base, really understanding our asset base, and it's a period of work that had started, and it's getting results. Of course, it's fascinating read if you want to sort of know the number of assets we have, and it's quite frightening that we have as many hotels as we have non-academy schools. It's quite a statistic. I always read out something. I read it to the Poundby Residents Association. That caused quite a few sighs, really. But it is, knowing our state is, we've got an awful lot of assets. We really need to be better with them. And do we need as many? Can we be smarter with them? And the farms estate and the hotel estate is one particular area of sort of scrutiny at the moment. But it lays out the whole process within that. It is a really good document, I believe. A lot of work has gone into it, and I thoroughly recommend it for approval. And I seek a seconder. Thank you.
I think Councillor Taylor is going to second it. Can I just seek clarification? I believe I know the answer, but the index to the agenda and agenda items at the beginning mention what I read out in the introduction to agenda item 14, and it says strategy management asset management plan 24 to 33, but the paper very clearly refers to 2030s. Can I get confirmation it's actually 2030? Yeah.
Leader, any reference to 2033 is erroneous. It should be 2030.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Taylor, you go second. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, I'm very happy to sorry, Councillor Taylor, Cabinet Member for Housing and Public Health. I'm very supportive of this, and it would give me a lot of pleasure to second this. I think when we were out on the doors earlier on this year, there was a lot of talk about housing, about the big need for housing in Dorset. And I think this asset management plan goes part of the way to help that. Our assets are going to be key to what we want to do with the housing strategy over the next few years. And this ties very well in with what we're looking at doing. I'm really looking forward to working with assets on this. I wish it'd been slightly more ambitious, but I think we can work with it as it is. The devil's going to be in the detail, but we'll go forward on it as it is, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Do any non-executive members wish to speak? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's a very, very quick question. There's a very useful infographic on page 341, which sets out all of the contributory strategies and policies that feed into the Strategic Asset Management Plan. The broad plan itself is very good. I think the aims of it are laudable and I support it. One of the things that slightly concerns me is the sheer amount of work that has to be done to try and get some of the strategies below it ready for them to have a true impact on what the SAMP is trying to achieve. In particular, it's the bottom one that interests me, which is the town centre strategy. I started this work last year to try and put more emphasis on town centre regeneration and how we would use our assets to revitalise certain areas where it needs it. I'm slightly concerned that 6 months into the new administration, I haven't seen any work yet on the town centre strategy. So it's just some reassurance, really, that whilst this plan itself is very, very good, are we actually doing the work underneath this to make sure that we've got all of the other plans in place before we actually go ahead and start dealing with our assets? Because we can't wait forever.
I think Mr. Britton wants to respond.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I agree. That list of further components to the plan is quite long, and there is a lot of work to be done there. And it does demonstrate that Dorset Council owns a great deal of assets, which in the past, under perhaps the council's pre-Dorset Council's formation, we perhaps had a tendency to collect assets without purpose or without strategy behind it, and we're now dealing with some of the legacy of those previous decisions. It also underlines the point perhaps that Councillor Hope was making earlier about some of our own assets, industrial estates, business parks and so on, and the interplay between our own assets and property and wider economic development in Dorset. There's a very strong relationship between the two. These sites are some of our own economic assets. The work on town centre, Market Town work is continuing. It will feature here and it will cross-reference into the economic development strategy work that was spoken of in the previous report, because we're trying to create that balanced approach across the whole of Dorset. But I won't disguise the fact that in delivering those sort of contributory strategies, there is a huge amount of work, and some of them will need to be done, you know, in advance of others, because our ability to progress them all at the same time is going to be a bit limited. But it's that approach to individual different classes of assets and reviewing like classes of assets, and then bringing forward proposals that look at all hotels, all business parks and so on and so on. That's the delivery mechanism for the strategic plan that you've got before you today.
Councillor Northam.
Thank you, Councillor Northam, Upway and Broadway. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this again, because this did go through place and overview. Looking again, it's startling, you know, it lists the 1,539, sorry, mentions the 1,539 sites, 682 operational, blah, blah, and there's lots of numbers in here, including, you know, the value of these sites is 441 million. It costs us 13.5 million to support these sites, but we only generate 4.1 million. And I understand there's a difference between sites which have an operational value and sites which generate an economic value. And I feel that there should be more emphasis, if you like, on which sites have an economic value that we should be trying to get an economic value out of, and which sites are operational, where we're providing a service or a facility. And we accept that it might even be making a loss on these sites, because certain things we're doing for the benefit of everybody. I just think it needs to break out the economic aspects of the aspects a bit more strongly, so that a bit more focus. It talks about project pipelines, and I'd love to see some project pipelines. It talks about reviewing the assets every 3 years. I'd like to see some progress and some, if you like, the low-hanging fruit, the big value, the big ticket items that might make a real difference coming forward. Getting to the end of the list, you don't need to get to the end of the list to know what's important. So I'd like to see, again, some forward plan in terms of when these project pipelines are actually going to be delivering and what we can hope to see in the future. Thank you.
Leader, it's a fair point and well made. The work of bringing order and direction to the council's property and asset base has been going on for quite some time, and you know, I have to say the agreement of this strategy is something of a line in the sand for helping us move forward. But I completely agree with your point that we need to be clear about the purpose of why we hold assets. Some we will hold for economic purpose, some we will hold for our own operational reasons, some we will hold for social or local community value. And again, similar to what I said in response to Councillor Gibson, at the moment we're not always clear why we hold an asset and what purpose we hold it for. And this strategy is, you know, part of bringing more order to that. My colleague, Mr. Wayne, would like to speak, if that's okay, Leader.
Leader, thank you very much. Julian Wayne, Strategic Property Advisor, and I've been involved in the drafting of this. Wanted to draw Councillor Northam's attention to the priorities, both the economic growth and opportunity and the commercial approach to driving income are set out in the report. But I thought I would take the opportunity also, Leader, to just remind you have a great number of priorities, and a little bit the same point as was made on the economic growth strategy earlier. You again face hard choices on some of this. You have an understandable and clearly articulated thrust on housing, and Councillor Taylor made the point earlier, but you will not be able to do everything you want with all your assets, extensive though the portfolio is. So just a brief word to encourage you to reinforce that prioritisation process.
Thank you. And we need to, and we will. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, clearly this all looks very ambitious, very joined up, very comprehensive. Jan has mentioned a line in the sand, but obviously the numbers that Councillor Northam has pointed to in the report indicate just how little progress we've made since Dorset Council became a unitary. And so some people in this room will remember that my former colleague, Councillor Heatley, was banging on about this all the time, relentlessly. And, you know, we know we need to be realising these assets. So the big question is, what are you going to say to me to convince me that a new strategy is actually going to expedite the process? And secondly, a more detailed question, something that former Councillor Heatley felt explained the lack of progress, and I've got no idea if this is true, which is why I'm asking this question, is that the inability to expedite disposal of surplus assets was largely because we couldn't recruit the necessary expertise in the staff team on the wages we were paying. Whether that's true, I've got no idea, but I think it's worth asking. Thank you.
Well, I think there's probably not best place to talk about the staffing issues. We know that there's been problems in the past and a churn of staff and a lot of interims, etc. That process is underway, but it is a challenge, and I'm sure officers, maybe Mr. Britton, will want to comment about that. I think, how is this going to be measured, is what you're trying to say. You will note that the actual objectives have not been set, the KPIs, and that is the key thing, because that's where scrutiny will come in, setting realistic things. So if we want to measure, you know, how we've improved economic numbers that we've generated from our assets that are not our operational ones, that's where we have to have smart objectives to do that, to measure ourselves, which is always risky, but that's what we're about, trying to improve and show that we're actually advanced from where we are. It is a challenge. Thank you.
Mr. Britton wishes to respond first, and then Claire.
Thank you, Leader. In answer to Councillor Sutton's question about how our policy helps us move forward, and you've rightly identified the relative size of our estate and the relatively limited amount of our resources. This document is all about priority. In many ways, that is the purpose of this strategy. It is to help us prioritise the relatively small amount of money we've got against the relatively large amount of demand that we face. So, as with a lot of council work, the strategy provides that prioritisation framework. That's the main function of it. In terms of your point about staffing, it is an area where many local authorities, property management, an area where we sometimes struggle to recruit staff with the appropriate expertise, and that's why we sometimes fall back on the agency market and using interim staff. But I think there are more creative ways of working. We could go to the external market and engage an agent to help us dispose of land that we're clear and sure we want to dispose of. So I wouldn't describe it as a full stop constraint on doing things. With a little bit of creativity, you can open up other avenues for doing those things. Very, very rarely is something completely constrained by the absence of the ability to recruit staff, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, just really quickly, that's a very reassuring response. Thank you for that. But just to say to Richard, I'm not really concerned about how it's measured, to be honest, being such a layperson. I'm concerned about how it's expedited. Thank you.
Nope, Councillor Clifford.
Councillor Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance, and apologies, I haven't announced myself previously. I think I've been really lax there. This is an incredibly important step that we're taking because just looking at the figures, you can just see how much benefit there is to be had and how much, the phrase sweat the asset that gets used all the time. This is a classic of where you actually physically do sweat the asset. What I would say is that over many, many years, and I do mean well over a decade, this area has been really poor in Dorset, really poor. There's been a lack of rigour, been a lack of insight, there's been a lack of understanding of cost benefit, and we just made sometimes bizarre decisions just because we can. And I think we've got a really good team in place now. My best wishes to Tim. I think we've got a great team in place. I think the future is looking really bright, and I think the next few months, as they really get to tackle and understand the breadth of what we have and what we can do with it, I think it'll be only to the benefit of the council.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clifford. I think we'll wrap it up. There's nobody else wishes to speak. No. Oh, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just looking at this and I'm just wondering if the officers or maybe the Cabinet member can tell me where in the priority list does it look at, where is in the priority list here within the strategic plan the commercial assets. So we've got 333 commercial assets. Now looking at the figures here, that the state costs circa 13.5 million to run and maintain each year, and the annual income is 4.1 million. Are we breaking even or making a profit from those commercial assets? And is a review of that going to be taken as a top priority within this document? Because I'd be slightly concerned that if it's not, it should be. I don't think that Dorset Council should be substituting some private property businesses that are running from our assets at the cost of the taxpayer.
Leader, the blunt truth is that we do not make a profit or a surplus on all of our commercially held assets. We do on some, we don't on others. We are beginning to get a better understanding of why, and it's a very mixed picture. There are assets that are of relatively low quality on which we make a profit, and assets of relatively high quality where we don't. And in truth, I think looking back over time, we haven't necessarily been the best landlord of such assets, and we haven't necessarily had the best strategy for making good use of such assets. This strategy before you today is, as I said earlier, a bit of a line in the sand to help us move forward on that. So I agree with your sentiment, but I'm not yet in a position to reassure you that in every case we're making a profit on property that we hold for commercial purposes.
I'm glad I asked this question now. So my question was, how soon will we do a review on that piece of work as in line with this strategy? Because we've now got the information that we're not utilising these profits from the commercial asset, and if they're not generating any money for us, then they're not a commercial asset, they're a liability. So we need to accelerate that piece of work within this plan, and that would form part of my recommendation then to do so.
One of the first tier strategies we're going to do, but given the history that Councillor Clifford has already referred to, going back for many years of difficulties in this area, I think it would be rash of me to promise that we're going to be able to bring solutions forward for all of these issues with perhaps the pace you might like. We are going to have to do quite a lot of work to bring some order to some of these questions. So it is a top tier, it is a first tier part of the work, but there is a lot to do to deliver this strategy, and I don't want to give you the false impression that we might be back at Cabinet in a month's time or 2 months' time with the answers that you're seeking.
So I'm pleased to hear that it is a top priority and it's going to be looked at. By no means was I expecting you to do it in a month or two. I'll give you 3. But no, I'm just glad that it is a top priority. It's something you're going to be looking at, and I look forward to seeing that come back to Cabinet or probably scrutiny in the very near future.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Your point of a commercial property making a loss is a liability is, yeah, it resonates. I think we're done. Can we, does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations that are in front of you in the paper? Nope. In which case, they'll be approved. Thank you very much. We can now fetch Councillor Holloway back in, which I think George is about to do. And then we move on to agenda item 15, and then we'll go back to 11 and 12. So 15 is a review of the Dorset Council waste strategy. Councillor Andrews will be presenting, but he's on holiday. Lucky him. So I'm briefly going to say it's the review of the Dorset Council waste strategy, and then immediately hand over to Gemma over there, who's going to do the rest of the work.
Thank you, Leader. This strategy review refreshes and replaces the previous strategies adopted by Dorset Council, and it sets the strategic direction for the longer term, but more specifically, it's kind of focused on the next 5 years, because that's where we've got most legislative change that we need to address. The strategic aims are listed in section 1.1 of the report, which is to increase our recycling and composting rate, to deliver an effective and cost-effective waste service, to continue to reduce the carbon emissions, and to meet our statutory requirements. So within the strategy, you'll see there are 7 policy objectives, which is how we're going to achieve those aims. The first one is about waste reduction and reuse. This is how we save money and we improve our performance. It's really key. If we reduce the waste, we don't have to pay for it. That is the obvious answer. So we have a key focus at the top of the waste hierarchy, focusing on waste reduction and reuse. The second policy objective is a target of 65% recycling and composting by 2035, and this is in line with national strategy. And the Recycle for Dorset curbside collection service that we have in Dorset is good, but we know that we can do more. We do waste analysis, so we look in the black bag to see what residents are throwing away, and 32% of what residents throw away in the black bag could have been recycled at the curbside. So there's more efficiency that we can get from our current service. Policy objective 3 is about residual waste treatment and making sure we take into account the waste hierarchy and cost in maximising the value from waste. This policy objective is especially important because the government will be including all waste incineration and energy from waste technologies in the UK emissions trading scheme from 2028. And this is probably the most significant regulatory intervention in the waste industry in a generation. And it's going to be a very powerful incentive for the government to help reach net zero. But financially, it's going to cost us a significant amount of money. So we really need to focus on that area. Policy objective 4 is about waste infrastructure. We need to make sure we've got the right infrastructure to deliver our service going forwards. And we also need to make sure that our decisions are data-led. So we have route optimization software now that we're using to look at making sure those decisions are data-led. Policy objective 5 is about efficient and cost-effective waste management services that provide value for money. And again, this is about focusing on reducing, reusing and recycling waste because, as I say already, that is the key area of how we can save the most amount of money. But we've also included in section policy objective 5 that we will endeavour to collaborate with neighbouring authorities to identify opportunities to develop waste infrastructure projects and or arrangements that offer best value for money for Dorset residents. And this point takes into account the feedback from the Place and Resources Overview Committee regarding cross-border arrangements. Policy Objective 6 is about commercial services and supporting Dorset businesses. We've got a good commercial service currently, and we aim to increase that. And by no means least, Policy Objective 7 is about reducing our climate change impact of waste services. So the recommendation of the paper is that Cabinet approve the revised Dorset Waste Strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Clinton. I will propose in Councillor Andrews' absence, and I believe Councillor Biggs is going to second. Do you wish to say anything?
Only to say I fully endorse the paper. I just wonder whether you would have any comment and how a waste incinerator at Portland doesn't exactly help. When I saw a report on BBC this morning that burning from incinerators is actually more carbon affected than coal-fired power stations. It's absolutely terrible. And it's particularly if you're using plastic. I understand the argument of if it's going to landfill, but if we're trying to reduce so much going to landfill and we're almost encouraging stuff that could be recycled to go into, it's just madness in my view. I'm not sure that's picked up in any way on the report, but okay.
Having been on the radio this morning speaking about the same thing and had a briefing note from the officers, which was very helpful, and it's all down to the waste hierarchy: reduce, reuse, recycle. And as mentioned in the report, it's not just about saving money. The less we have to put into landfill or burn, it does save us money, but it also reduces our carbon cost. There is no imperative for burning stuff to generate electricity. It's been used, I think, around the country, and we're not an authority that does it, but I think it's been used by authorities around the country as a cheap way of avoiding landfill tax, and so they don't recycle as they should, and they just burn stuff, which is wrong. But I think we should be proud of our waste service in Dorset Council. We are the #1 unitary in England. We're in the top 5 overall. The amount of stuff we actually send to landfill is really small. We do burn stuff, unfortunately, because there is no alternative at the moment, but the amount we burn is reducing year on year. I don't know if Ms Clinton wants to say any more.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Absolutely endorse what you're saying. And Policy Objective 3 is about our residual waste treatment, and we will take into account the waste hierarchy and any future decisions about where our residual waste goes. And as I said before, the inclusion of the emissions trading scheme with energy from waste plants and incineration going forward is going to have a massive driver in the industry to reduce all plastic in black bag waste. So we're going to have that financial incentive to make sure that waste is removed, which will help address the concerns that have raised recently around incineration. But absolutely, it's about waste reduction and reuse and recycling, because that's where we make the real efficiencies.
Thank you. And just because I can, I will mention the Portland Waste Incinerator. We don't want it here. We objected to it. We are still in the process of deciding whether there's going to be judicial review. We'll announce that decision very soon. I think I've made the point that the incinerator has a capacity of something like 200,000 tonnes a year. We generate about 35,000 potentially. Even if we sent everything that turns into fuel to Portland, we end up, that's 20% of its capacity. We'll have to import 80%, and that will kill our carbon targets, because we'll have an incinerator, and that's what it is. It's not energy to waste, and it's based in Dorset, and it will be spewing out CO2, and we will never hit our carbon targets if it's built. That's the sad fact of it. It'll probably become the most carbon intensive part of Dorset, I suspect. Anyway, moving on. Does anybody wish to speak from who wasn't on the Cabinet? Councillor Fry and Councillor Pearce.
Chair, I just want to echo your comments on the good work that Dorset Waste is doing, because it's brilliant. The recycling, what they're doing, all their results are worth recognising. Recycling 59.1%, #1 unitary in disposal in the country, lowest quantity of residual waste per household, over 70% reduction in landfill going to, in the top 3 authorities in the country. It's brilliant results. We should shout about that and say congratulate the whole team. So well done and thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Piers-Brown. I represent the beautiful Cranbourne Chase ward. Councillor Fry has stolen some of what I wanted to say. Our waste service is one of our crown jewels as an organisation. I think we should all be very proud of what they do. But building on that, there is reference within the report, and I appreciate the report is more about the outputs of our waste service necessarily than our inputs to it. There is reference to the new tip and waste sorting facility planned for the Blandford Forum area, which I'm sure most of us would agree is desperately needed, both from a HRC perspective and from a waste management perspective. But I also wanted to make sure that our commitment remained ironclad to exploring options in the Wimborne area as well, because I know, representing a ward in the east, that I get a lot of complaints about that as much as I do Blandford. And if we want to improve our recycling rate and people engaging in sorting the waste properly, making it as easy as possible for them to dispose of the waste correctly should be very high on that agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Simon Gibson, representing the Verwood ward. I won't repeat all of the great praise, well-earned praise for the work that the waste recycling team do, but I do agree with it. I was planning on saying a lot more than I will say, because I was going to talk about the issue I raised both at full council and previously when this paper came to the overview committee about cross-border HRC use. Some of it is now redundant because there is now the line in Policy Objective 5 that mentions it, and without wanting to be negative, because I am grateful to see its inclusion from overview, is it really couldn't be in there any weaker than it is at the minute. Endeavour to collaborate. That is soft language when we're talking about key infrastructure on a universal service that thousands of people in the East in particular use. I don't want to be a pedant on language here, but I would just love some reassurance as this paper progresses, because the paper is a good paper, that we are going to be far more proactive about how we manage our HRC cross-border relationships, because great news on Summerley came out yesterday, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily guaranteed to be a long-term solution. So the question for those of us whose residents use HRCs, not endorse it, is what does this strategy have to offer them? And is there anything we can do before it progresses that it can be beefed up, please?
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. And yes, it was good news that the Summerley HRC, Hampshire County Council, have given it a stay of execution, let's say. We obviously do use several HRCs in Hampshire and BCP, I believe, and I believe the Wimborne. I don't know this subject particularly well. I'm going to hand it over again in a minute, but Councillor Andrews would probably say it better. But obviously, Wimborne is, I guess, I think it's fair to say, is not fit for purpose. It needs to be replaced. I know the previous administration looked at doing that, and we haven't come up with a solution yet. It's likely to be expensive, I suspect, but we are looking at it. So I believe, but I'll hand it over to the expert.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this is a high-level waste strategy, so there isn't the detail in there. But once we've got the waste strategy in place, one of the work streams that we will be looking at is household recycling centres in totality. So that will be the wider infrastructure of them and how they will look and feel going forward, and make sure that they're fit for purpose in the future. So more detailed work and collaboration with members will come separate, sort of underneath this strategy.
Councillor Hobbs-Chow.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I again echo, the really good work that's been done. And I wanted to just point out the bit in the report that says developing new campaigns where things go. And I think that's a really valuable thing, because a lot of the residents that I speak to, they put the bins out and then they think, well, does it all just go into the same place, or does it is there a point in me doing this, and all of those things. And actually, I think our messaging could be enhanced even better there, where we do show where it goes, and we do identify that this thing goes this way and it makes this, and we take that message to schools. We do all of that work. So I'm really glad to see that in there, and I think that's a real arm for development going forward.
we go. Anybody else wish to speak? Not in the Cabinet? Nope. Anybody in the Cabinet? I'm looking at Councillor Hope since he's spoken out every paper so far. No. No. In which case, does anybody disagree with the recommendations, or can we take them as approved? I don't see any dissent, so they are approved. Thank you very much. We'll now go back. Oops, I get to close the mic. We go back to agenda item 11, which is back to Councillor Bartlett, and it's this is quite an interesting one, isn't it? It's quite topical. It's the BCP Council and Met Need request response.
Thank you, Chairman. So the BCP Council Unmet Need Request Response. I don't think it will escape anybody's attention that the new methodology targets that have been handed down by government to statutory planning authorities such as ours have been quite frightening. So as laid out in the report, some of the figures there to give some of the background, the BCP Council have been requested by government to deliver 2,806 homes per year, approx. They've made their submission to the Inspectorate on their local plan, in which they put in 1,600 homes per year to be delivered approximate. That shortfall is 1,206 per year. So they then requested for us to make up some of their housing need. So Dorset Council's in a position with its standard methodology that it's moved from 1,793 homes per year previously, was what was being requested, to now 3,230 per year with that new methodology. So we're going to have to go out in consultation regarding new development sites in order to bring forward the additional housing that we're going to be requested to deliver. And it's doubtful that we'll meet that housing numbers, which is why we've declined BCP to meet with the housing need. There is a view within with our officers that BCP have not exhausted all of their options to deliver their housing numbers, and which is something they need to do. So you'll see the recommendation, Chairman, that the Cabinet consider the proposed response to the BCP Council letter of 11th of June 2024, requesting that Dorset Council consider helping to meet the unmet housing need arising from the proposals of the BCP local plan, and that Dorset Council is unlikely to be able to meet any of the BCP Council unmet housing need without further work on the urban capacity and Greenbelt review being undertaken, particularly in light of the significant increase in housing targets proposed through the recent government consultation. Thank you, Chairman.
Nope. There you go. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I believe Councillor Holloway is going to second.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, very happy to second the recommendation for this. As my colleague has said, you know, these are obviously targets that it's going to be unrealistic, and obviously, as my cabinet colleague has already said, is that I think BCP need to look at obviously other means of obviously able to accommodate some of those numbers. So happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. I'm going to jump the queue, I think, because I want to ask two questions. On the basis that hopefully lots and lots of people are watching this online at home, there's many mentions in the paper about Greenbelt, and there's the suggestion that we will actually be building on Greenbelt. Is that actually a realistic possibility? And the other one is the duty to cooperate with BCP. Can we actually can somebody strong arm us into doing that? Can central government go, yeah, you have to take it all?
Chairman, before I go to the officers to answer that, I think part of the unreasonableness was that the BCP are expecting us to look at our green belt, but aren't willing to give up any of their own green belt, which is part of the issue. That's one of the issues in which they need to address to deliver their own housing numbers. And I'll then refer back to the officers, Chairman. Thank you.
Terry Sneller, Strategic Planning Manager. In relation to Greenbelt, that I think that the government's priority coming through with the revised national planning policy, suggesting that as part of the approach of producing a local plan, we consider different options within the Greenbelt to meet the overall need. That could include the new definition of what's called grey belt, which is coming through the national policy as well, which is almost like a relaxation of part of the Greenbelt policy. So we would need to look at it and see what options there are. The paper here suggests that a joint approach between Dorset Council and BCP Council to look at most appropriate locations is what should be done. In relation to the duty to cooperate, that's a legal test that both BCP and Dorset Council will have to demonstrate that they've met through the examination of the local plan. So that's something that we do have to meet, and it's tested through the examination.
Leader, could I just quickly add to that point as well, though, that it's not, as is often stated, that's not a duty to agree. The cooperation is we have to look and explore and show that we've actually worked together, but that doesn't mean that an inspector would be able to impose on Dorset Council something that we were unable to demonstrate we could meet. So we would be testing that through our own local plan process.
Thank you. Councillor Rezard next.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Beryl-Ezard, Wareham Ward. I know we've not got our plan together yet, but will we have a reciprocal letter sending to BCP saying, will they help us out in case we need it? Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Ezard, thank you for the question. Mike Garrity, Head of Planning. Technically speaking, we would have to look at what options are available for us depending on whether or not we can meet the needs that are set out in the methodology. For us, that would be testing whether it's actually deliverable, and the consultation that government has set out is also indicating that we can take into account things such as constraints and environmental issues that might actually inhibit our ability to deliver that housing need. But that would mean we would still be in a position of looking at whether neighbouring authorities are able to cooperate with us across a range of issues, whether that be housing or anything else. So we wouldn't rule that out at this stage. We would have to look at that depending on where the evidence was taking us.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Suttle.
Thank you, Chair. Gary Suttle, representing Swanage. Well, I'm sure a majority of people online would like to see a recommendation that simply said no. And that's what I'd like to have seen. But I guess the wording, which, to be frank, is very wishy-washy, unlikely to be able to meet any of the BCP Council unmet housing need without further work. It seems to suggest that we're going to do our best to work to see if we can find something. I don't like the wording at all. So if it could be beefed up, I'm listening to what Garrity said, and I understand the processes we've got to go through. But it seems to me that this recommendation is syndicating that if we could, we would. And I'd rather we said we'd rather not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Suttle. I believe we have Councillor Parry who wishes to speak. He's online.
Thank you. Yes, I'm rather in agreement with my colleague Councillor Suttle on this one. Councillor Andrew Parry, I represent West Parley Ward, and that's a ward that borders the BCP conurbation. I have to say we don't always find BCP the easiest of neighbours to deal with. Of the 5 councils that border the Dorset Council area, their sort of rather brazen approach to a suggestion they can land grab in Dorset has come up once again, and I think, as Councillor Suttle has said, a very short, to the point reply, leaving them in no doubt that they are not welcome to offload the more difficult bits of their local plan onto us. Where there is common ground, for example, we heard earlier about the HRC at Summerley, that is a more practical, workable conversation, and we should, of course, embrace those. But I do expect quite a robust line. I'm very conscious that 3 of the BCP constituencies that are wholly inside the BCP area elected Labour representation under the understanding that that would see a significant increase in housing numbers demanded, and therefore they should meet that demand inside those constituencies and not seek to push it over the border.
Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the members might not like the wording, but unfortunately, as all things in local government, the devil is in the detail, and the expector will expect us to have cooperated, and that's what we will be tested on. It would be nice if in a utopian world if we could say no, a short-term, a one-word answer like that, but unfortunately, in the realities of life, that's not the world in which we're living.
Councillor Clifford.
No, it's not a one-word answer, it's a two-word answer. And I'm happy to do an executive summary that ends with the word off. No, absolutely no chance.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. I tend to agree. I'd like a stronger response, but if this is what we're legally tied up to, we can do that. I think the reality is we're going to find ourselves in a similar position when we come to do our local plan. The government has set unrealistic targets. And am I realistically worried? No, because I don't think the infrastructure is there to support this target building. There's not the building materials, there's not the building skill set, there's not the trade. Government have sent us into a position where we're all struggling, and we're all in this situation now about how to meet this needs, which is making our local plans viable where we can't meet them. And the government set us up to fail. And I think, as well as this, I think we should support BCP in writing to government to stress that fact, that the numbers you are setting in these areas, not just these areas, across the whole country, are unrealistic. They're not achievable. You need to relax them to a more achievable delivery model. So I don't know if we can build that into the recommendation or not.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. I believe, well, I know, I don't just believe, we did submit a response to the government and also through bodies such as the LGA and CCN. Hilary Jordan authored it, I believe. It did push back against pretty much everything the Labour government is proposing. In terms of housing, bottom line is we can't meet our existing targets, let alone double them. Targets don't build houses, builders do. So, Councillor Hope, you wish to speak again?
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm quite content that we've done that then, but maybe we can stress that in the response and urge BCP to do the same if they haven't already.
I don't know if BCP have responded yet or what their content is, but I'll look to the officers in a minute. But Councillor Sutton, do you wish to say something?
Very quickly, very simply, I've failed to introduce myself on any occasion this evening. Councillor Claire Sutton, Cabinet Member for Children's Service Education and Skills. It would certainly reflect the view, not only within Cabinet, but actually across this chamber, were there the opportunity to beef up these words whilst remaining within the parameters as set out by Shane. I really think we would all feel much happier with something a bit more robust, whilst recognising that it does need to tick the box.
So you're bordering on some sort of amendment, I guess, but it probably needs to be a bit more if you want to do that specific. But Councillor Bartlett?
Yeah, Chairman, the response was made on the 11th of June. We've already made the response. The wording was in the letter. Due to the timeframes within the council, it had to be done at that point. One of the biggest constraints we've got within Dorset is around the land, the type of land that we have that makes up Dorset. We are a beautiful county with the AONB and with Lowline, Dorset, Heathland, Greenbelt, obviously. There is a whole myriad of land in Dorset where it's very difficult to build or to develop. So that is one of our major constraints about delivering these housing numbers. But I'll refer back to the officers now if they want to add anything to that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. Mike Garrity, Head of Planning. I think just to pick back onto the point that this is an official and formal response to the duty to cooperate request. And just for some reassurance that the Secretary of State has to test the local authority whose local plan is before them, that they can actually deliver their own housing needs. So that's going to be a really important test for them. As far as the sentiments of this committee are concerned, Cabinet, we quite happily put those into a covering letter in association with the report that goes or the response that goes in an official capacity so that we can pick up and actually flag up the fact that the Cabinet has real concerns about the request that's been put to us and that I think would address the sentiments, I believe, of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. That seems a reasonable solution. Councillor Sutton's happy with it, at least? Yeah, I think we all. Yeah. In which case, we'll draw this to a close. I'm not really sure about given the fact that it was already sent in June, so we're responding to the formal request, but we've already responded, but we're going to respond again by sending a letter, I guess. It doesn't really make much sense, to be honest, to me. But does anybody disagree with what's written on the paper? Nope. In which case, we'll approve it. Thank you. And we're on the home straight almost. So we're on item 12 now. This is possibly the most controversial item on the agenda tonight. So this is the allocation of Section 106 developer contribution funding for community facilities at Mampits Green in Shaftesbury. And that's over to Councillor Bartlett again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Shane Bartlett, Cabinet Member for Planning and Emergency Planning and Ward Member for Wimbledon. So this has been a long, ongoing saga around this Section 106 development and proposal to bring forward this infrastructure. So the item before you concerns the delivery of important community facilities for residents at Shaftesbury. The report details rival bids by Shaftesbury Town Council and Mampits Lane Community Land Trust for Section 106 developer contribution funds to build, manage and eventually own a community hall and associated facilities on land at Mampits Green in Shaftesbury. The land in question is allocated for this purpose through associated development, and when the facility is complete, it will provide a much needed community enhancement to support the significant level of growth which has occurred in the area. The financial contributions being sought have been collected from several development sites in Shaftesbury for the purpose. Reaching this stage has taken many years, and both parties have invested considerable time and effort and money at risk during that time. Extensive efforts have been made to encourage joint working between the competing parties. Unfortunately, these efforts have been unsuccessful, and members are now faced with a choice using the findings of an assessment to make their decision. Underpinning the assessment of bids is an application process and a protocol. The protocol was introduced by Cabinet in May 2021 to provide greater accountability to the process for awarding Section 106 developer contribution funding to a third-party organisation such as the Town and Parish Council and not-for-profit organisations such as charities. Each bid has been carefully assessed with consideration of a range of factors including cost, project management and project delivery. The results drawn from the assessment are finely balanced with different strengths and weaknesses evident in each application. Full details of the assessments can be found in Appendix B. Each bid proposes a community building with supporting uses such as car park, play and open space. Appendix A provides a series of plans and drawings showing the design of each proposal. You'll see that differences lie in the disposition of these uses across the site. Both proposals have secured appropriate planning permission, a key component for demonstrating delivery. Both proposals rely heavily on the availability of Section 106 funding, with the Town Council using some of its own funds to cover the funding shortfalls. The Community Land Trust proposal provides detailed and substantiated project costings, yet the Shaftesbury Town Council proposal providing stronger governance and financial resilience is a well-established and experienced democratically elected accountable body. Through the assessment, concerns have been raised in the operational capability of both proposals, with only limited high-level information provided in this regard. While the Community Land Trust proposal is informed by a greater degree of information relating to operational costs, capability risks due to this Community Land Trust limited experience, current unclear financial standing, and fallback support were evident through the assessment. Conversely, the proposal by Shaftesbury Town Council is considered to have more awareness of operational alternatives and provides a better demonstration of community group interest, providing greater confidence that the proposal will be successful. The conclusion of the assessment is that funding is awarded to Shaftesbury Town Council. Where addressable weaknesses have been identified, it is necessary to recommend conditions for the release funding and land in order to satisfactorily deal with the matters raised. These conditions are set out in the report and will form part of the bespoke deed or equivalent agreement between Dorset Council and the awarded party. To be agreed prior to the release of funding, the deed will be consistent with the requirements of approved Section 106 Protocol for Planning Obligation Funding Allocations. This will ensure further safeguards and necessary assurances are put in place for stages involving the release of the land or funding, adding confidence to the successful achievability of the project. So, Chairman, the recommendation is in two parts, and the officers are recommending Part A, which is to award ring-fence Section 106 developer contributions up to the value of £876,278 to Shaftesbury Town Council for the purpose of building and operating a community hub and landscaped open space and recreational facilities at Manpits Green, Shaftesbury. Subject to fulfilment of the conditions set out in paragraphs 6.7 and 6.14 of this report, that the appraisal of further information required by the conditions as agreed by the Head of Planning in consultation with the Cabinet Member and Portfolio for Planning and Emergency Planning, and any subsequent transfer of funds and land is made under the relevant officer delegation in accordance with the Section 106 protocol process. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I believe Councillor Holloway is going to second the proposal.
Yes, I'm happy to second the proposal on the, as my cabinet colleague has already stipulated. Thank you.
Do any members of the non-executive councillors here wish to say anything? No. Any member of the cabinet wish to say anything? Councillor.
Councillor Simon Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance. I just wondered if Councillor Butler just gives a one-liner on why the officers prefer option A. I can understand the fact that because they're able to raise their precept that they would be a more sustainable, financially sustainable option, perhaps. But what's the thinking behind A over or?
I'm going to refer to the officers, but there was a significant difference in the shortfall of actually funding, which was coming from 106 contributions, and the Town Council as a elected statutory body seemed to be the best option for actually taking delivery of the project, but I'll refer back to officers now.
Yeah, thank you. Mike Garrity, Head of Planning. In addition to what Councillor Bartlett has pointed out, I think there was a degree of additional resilience in terms of the potential operating models as well of the Town Council, which was looking at other options that could actually deliver a more sustainable delivery mechanism. I think it was more robust in that sense. So, whereas I think there was a reliance on volunteers on the CTC scheme. So I think from that point of view, officers felt that stood in good stead. But I would add and stress that it was a finely balanced assessment, and both schemes had a lot to commend them. But the balance of judgment came down in favour of the Town Councils.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back to your point, 5.6 within the report, the shortfall in terms of funding for the Community Land Trust is £72,000. That would be made up from Section 106 money from other developments within the Shaftesbury area. The Town Council shortfall was £24,000. So I think you have to take consideration as to whether the Section 106 money would be better spent for the provision of facilities and infrastructure within Shaftesbury, rather than using all of the Section 106 money in the proposal that's on the table. Thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's what you really want is them to work together, don't you? And you've got a proposal that will, if it goes through on either side, that will be hoping that some of the provision will be supported by the other side. And it just feels like if you could get the two groups to have a conversation together and try to come together, you'd have a really successful offering.
Councillor Bartlett again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we're back to that utopian world, aren't we? My predecessor tried really hard, and I know that the previous political lead administration tried really hard to get the parties in the room to work together. It just proved impossible, unfortunately. So we are where we are. It's an unusual situation to be in with what you've got before you. But as I say, the officer recommendation is A that you've seen in the report. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. I echo the thoughts there of Councillor Clifford. You'd like to think in an ideal world that these organisations would work together because what they want is exactly the same. I'm just wondering, have we had any input from, and I asked the Cabinet member, from the local ward members, or if they're online, what they felt was their preference and any reasons why?
I did have conversations with the ward members, but I don't think it would be my place to actually speak on their behalf, Chairman. I think they would need to make their own comments.
They're not online, so in which case I think it would be fair to guess their views. I think I'm right in saying they're both members of the Town Council. I believe they are, in which case they probably have an interest anyway. Mike Garrity, do you wish to say anything?
Yeah, just to mention that we'd obviously had both planning applications before which were considered, and so there was opportunities as well for ward members to be involved. As I understand it, no clear preference. So I think that's where we, as far as we're concerned, that hasn't affected the judgment and balance that's before members today.
Thank you for that. There's obviously a lot of history here. Somebody's going to be upset and somebody isn't. The recommendation has been thought through, and it's recommendation A. So I think we probably need to take a vote rather than go to a vote rather than do what we've been doing usually. So if I can take a show of hands for recommendation A. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. And now we move on to exempt business. I don't think there is anybody else there, but I need to read out some legalese. There's no, sorry, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Yeah, so I have to read out, so I'll just read it out. So that the recommendation is that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, to exclude the public from the meeting for the business specified in the item below, because it is likely that if members of the public were present, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest in withholding that information outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information to the public. Can I have a proposer that we do that, please? Councillor Robinson, seconder. Councillor Holloway, thank you. I think we've already ascertained there's no members of the public here. We need to close the live stream. Thank you.